Hello, and welcome back to Pathfinder. My name is Philip, and I'm here to talk about Pathfinder 2nd Edition. This is part of a series I'm producing covering the various factions in the Pathfinder role-playing game and its setting, the world of Golarion. Last time, I discussed the faith of Droskar, the villain of the Dwarven Pantheon, and the patron of the Hringar of the Darklands. This week, I am concluding Dwarf Month with a discussion of the Rivethun, a spiritual philosophy founded among the dwarves of Golarion. The Rivethun might not be as widespread or well recognized as the Green Faith, but they date back to the Age of Darkness and before. In the Age of Lost Omens, their presence is on the rise again, and their influence on the events of dwarven culture is growing, especially in Highhelm and the Five Kings Mountains. While not much has been published about the Rivethun, I appreciate their existence as another aspect of dwarven culture, and am excited to discuss them and bring them a bit more attention. Before that, though, if you enjoy this video and want to hear more Pathfinder lore, consider subscribing or commenting below. With that out of the way, let's move on to the rundown. 10,000 years ago, before the Age of Darkness, the dwarves still dwelled in the dark places below the surface, and the spirits spoke to them. Some of these spirits were known entities, spirits of the rocks or the rivers, spirits of the deceased, or spirits of the animals of the depths. Other spirits were more esoteric, powerful fey creatures, mysterious elementals, or even the occasional outsider from the great beyond. And still more spirits were even less quantifiable, existing only as small voices which could make themselves heard in the minds of the dwarven people. And listening to these voices, from the loudest to the quietest, were the Rivethun. The exact origins of the Rivethun are unknown. According to their own lore, they, or at least their direct predecessors, have existed since the beginning of recorded dwarven history. The Rivethun were only one of several sects of spiritualists and philosophers who centered their lives around the interactions with these myriad spirits. These mediums, guides, and shamans took up positions of religious leadership among the Darklands dwarves. In addition to instructing the dwarves how to live in harmony with these spirits, they also worked with the spirits to glean their secrets, set them at ease, and accumulate favors which they might use to further protect the dwarven people. According to the Rivethun, this system of spirituality and animism was the original dwarven religion. It lasted for thousands of years, and even predated faith in Torag. Speaking of the Forge Father, there was a single spirit whose voice was heard by more dwarves than any other. This powerful spirit made promises of an eventual sign for all dwarven people, a sign that they should begin an ascension to the surface world. This sign eventually came in the form of a massive, globe-spanning earthquake, which was felt in the depths of Narvoth and beyond. Upon this quake, the voice revealed its identity as Torag, the patriarch of the Dwarven Pantheon and the creator of the Dwarven people. Upon this revelation, the dwarves of the Darklands began their famous quest for Sky, pushing themselves and their neighboring orcs to the surface of Golarion in the Age of Darkness. As they made their ascent, the dwarves slowly lost their connection to the spirits which they had heeded for millennia, and embraced the faith of Torag and his family. By the time of the dwarven emergence onto the surface, the Dwarven Pantheon was firmly established as such, and the non-deific spiritual practices had been relegated to a few specialized practitioners and scholars. Such is the history of the quest for Sky, as the Rivethun tell it. Over the thousands of years since the quest for Sky, the Rivethun have endured. While not quite obscure among the dwarves, the Rivethun are only one small faction among many in dwarven society, and they are relatively unknown to outsiders. They are the last remaining organization dedicated to the old ways of dwarven spiritualism. Or, at least, they are the most prominent of those groups by far, and are the only such group detailed by Paizo. They are currently most active in the Five Kings Mountains, and in dwarven strongholds like Kragadan and Yanderhof. The Rivethun are a religious, philosophical, and, to a lesser degree, political organization. They hold to the old dwarven traditions regarding spirituality and communion with spiritual beings. While they advocate for the well-being of spirits as a whole, they are not above confronting troublesome spirits, or mediating conflicts between spirits and dwarves with neutrality when necessary. They prize knowledge and understanding as tools which can aid them in these efforts. The name Rivethun itself is derived from an ancient dwarven phrase meaning releaser of secrets. Rivethun spirituality is very much a religion, but it has much more in common with broadly animistic faiths like Shoanti animism or the Green Faith than it does with the theistic faiths of Golarion. The Rivethun recognize Torag and his relatives as important players in dwarven culture and history, but interpret them not as deities, but exceptionally powerful spirits. The gods are certainly worthy of respect, and sometimes even worship, but are fundamentally the same as the other spirits which the Rivethun recognize. In addition to the recognition of deities as spirits, the Rivethun also treat all manner of powerful beings in much the same way. Powerful elementals, or element-infused beings, are a notable subset of these spirits, as the planes of earth and water in particular have a strong connection to parts of the Darklands. These elements would have had a regular presence in dwarven life, and so elementals with influence over them would have been somewhat common. Spirits of the dead, malignant or benign, would have been encountered with some regularity as well, and so dealing with them and helping them find peace is an important feature of Rivethuni teachings. Other powerful beings, like sentient animals or even fey creatures, were also recognized as spirits and treated with reverence. The broad categorization inherent to the term spirit seems to be a feature of Rivethun philosophy, rather than a bug. It's important to remember that this philosophy developed in the Darklands. While the dwarves were native to Narvoth, the uppermost and safest layer of the Darklands, they were still under constant threat from the region's many dangers, including the orcs, who were their neighbors. Any faith or spirituality which developed in this environment would need to provide practical benefit to its devotees. A good example of this is the faith of Droskar, which rose to prominence among the Hringar after the quest for Sky. Though Droskar's faith was merciless and burdensome, it provided the deep dwarves with the power necessary to survive in a hostile and unforgiving land. Similarly, the Rivethun provided practical benefits to the dwarven communities they served. By classifying a wide variety of beings as spirits and learning how to communicate, bargain, and ally with all of them, the Rivethun developed a useful set of skills for ensuring their community's survival. In dealing with these myriad spirits, the Rivethun took, and continue to take, a similarly pragmatic approach. While spirits are generally revered by Rivethuni mystics, they are also seen as sources of knowledge and power, and are understood to have their own goals and motivations which can be understood and even exploited. The Rivethun teach their members to approach spirits diplomatically, with the goal of understanding their individual needs. Practitioners then attempt to aid these spirits in their goals, generally in exchange for some favor. These favors often take the form of hidden knowledge, guidance to hidden valuables, or the negation of some threat. The relationships between the Rivethun and the spirits they worship are more overtly transactional than in more traditional religions, in large part due to the reduced power disparity between practitioners and individual spirits. Spirits are seen much more akin to people than to incomprehensible deities. To better understand spirits, and to encourage good relations between dwarves and spirits in general, Rivethuni philosophy encourages practitioners to harmonize their body and spirit. Sometimes this harmonization can be entirely internal, using breathing techniques, meditation, careful study, and reflection to find inner peace. Alternatively, and quite commonly, this harmonization can have external effects. Early on in the Rivethun's history, they developed and refined a pair of medications which could be used to alter the sex characteristics of the imbiber. Doses of Mulibrus tincture could be taken regularly over a period of several months to suppress masculine characteristics and encourage the development of feminine ones. Conversely, Anderos salve could be applied over the same period to do the opposite. The medications could also be taken in combination to suppress masculine and feminine characteristics in combination. So, yes, the Rivethun dwarves of Golarion have successfully developed a permanent and relatively inexpensive version of HRT. For this reason, trans and non-binary individuals feel a strong draw to the Rivethun. The organization is known to provide these medications to non-members, as well as the support and therapy which go along with them, but many who receive such treatment find themselves drawn to the organization afterward. The attunement of spirit and body is often an emotionally difficult process, even with the guidance of experienced Rivethuni leaders. Despite the many tools they've developed to aid those experiencing such difficulties, these challenges are a core part of Rivethuni teachings. Emotional turmoil is something which drives many hostile spirits, so individuals who have successfully dealt with such experiences in their own lives generally have a better chance to relate to and deal with such a spirit. This is another factor which contributes to the prominence of trans and non-binary individuals among the Rivethun. Even in the relatively progressive Golarion, cisnormativity is extremely common, so individuals who don't conform to the gender binary still face a serious uphill battle in many places. Those who work through these struggles have, at least among the Rivethun, proven well suited to relating to and sympathizing with the inner turmoil faced by many spirits the Rivethun revere. To be clear, I'm not glorifying the hardships faced by gender nonconforming individuals, and I don't think that's what Paizo is trying to do either. I interpret this lore as a celebration of the unique perspectives these individuals can bring to society, and to dwarven society in specific. That said, I am cisgender, so there are people out there way more qualified than myself to elaborate on this topic further, and I encourage you to seek them out. The Queerfinder publication, on Pathfinder Infinite, is a good place to start, and is a pretty good read besides. Getting back to the lore proper, beyond the harmonization of spirits and body, the Rivethun emphasize the acquisition of knowledge. For this reason, their churches often incorporate vast libraries, in addition to spaces for meditation. Many of the works the Rivethun collect are ancient texts, which were recovered by their members on fieldwork, or were given by spirits as payment for services rendered. On the topic of Rivethun churches, the two most prominent are in Highhelm and Larad, both in the Five Kings Mountains. In Highhelm, the Smoldering Court can be found in King's Heart, the middle level of the city. This place acts as a monastery and a gathering place for all spiritual practitioners and those seeking their aid. The city of Larad, smaller than Highhelm but still sizable, serves as the base of operations for the Rivethun. Here, the Court of 1000 is their headquarters and houses much of their collected knowledge. The Rivethun also maintain a lasting presence in Osirian, though that hasn't been detailed as clearly in any source I can find. There are a few notable members of the Rivethun who have been discussed by Paizo. The official leader of the Rivethun is High Seeker Polbar Trueye, an agender dwarf who runs the Court of 1000 in Larad. They manage the 1000 spirits said to protect and inhabit the court and instruct lesser practitioners in the ways of the order. They also maintain a close watch on Highhelm and the growing social tensions in the city. They believe, as do many members of the Rivethun, that intense spiritual unrest is coming to Highhelm, and the situation must be closely monitored. Within Highhelm itself, Nenakari Augor manages the Smoldering Court. The increasing spiritual activity in the city has kept her busy, but her old eyes are still sharp, and she maintains her knack for sizing up those who come to her seeking aid, and is quick to surmise what they need. Just because she is quick to understand, however, does not mean her advice is quick to help. The old animist is prone to speaking in esoteric phrases, or even riddles, which take hours, days, or even weeks to fully understand. Nenakari is ancient, and lived a full life as an adventurer before taking on the role of a guide and teacher in the organization. Despite her odd turns of phrase, she is well respected among both Rivethuni members and non-members. Zomar Glavit is as close to a field operative as the Rivethun have. A capable scholar, explorer, and mage, Zomar has spent many years delving into the Darklands, retracing the steps of the quest for Sky, and rediscovering the many entities who aided the dwarves in their ancient ascent. Zomar first joined the Rivethun after the organization aided in his gender transition, and enthusiastically joined up, finding a home among like-minded souls. The knowledge he collects, and especially his Darklands maps, are treasured among the Rivethun. Finally, the geniekin, known as Third Rent in the Basalt, is valued among the organization for their unique perspective. Third Rent is a genie born on the material plane, meaning they have a soul which is separate from their body and not made from the innate matter of their elemental plane. This allows them to offer a perspective which few other beings can, that of an immortal genie not bound by the underlying traits of their home plane. Third Rent is known for their devotion to ancient teachings and traditions, and passes these lessons on to all who seek them. Hierarchy among the Rivethun is largely informal, and is generally decided by level of experience or wisdom. While the High Seeker in the Court of 1000 is a formal position, it does appear to be the exception rather than the rule in the Rivethun organization. Other positions are substantially less formal. Generally speaking, the greater a member's accomplishments, the more powerful spirits they appease, and the more knowledge they discover or record, the more respected they are. For players who might be interested in playing characters affiliated with the Rivethun, here are a few useful details. The Rivethun, to my knowledge, have no published alignment restrictions, edicts, or anathema. This might be due to their loose organizational structure or to their relatively small presence in published media in general. My best guess is that any non-evil alignment would be accepted in their ranks, if you still use alignment at your table. Common edicts among the Rivethun likely include to harmonize your body and spirit, and to help others in doing so, to treat spirits with reverence, to accumulate knowledge and understanding, and to lead efforts for cooperation between spirits and dwarven society. Conversely, common anathema among members of the Rivethun likely include to push towards societal progress with no heed for tradition or history, to deliberately subvert the internal harmony of others, or to put knowledge or power to use with no concern for the well-being of your community. The most relevant aspect to discuss regarding Rivethuni character options is their bond to the spirits with which they deal. Members of the Rivethun often have a bond with one or more spiritual beings, which is a prominent aspect of their character build. This bond commonly takes the form of a familiar. Familiars can serve as guides or go-betweens for the Rivethun and the spirits with whom they work. The most famous member of the Rivethun was, and still is, Shardra Geltel, the iconic shaman from 1E. The shaman, like the witch, put a lot of importance on the familiar as a class feature. So, familiars as conduits for spiritual connection has gotten some serious representation among the Rivethun. The 2E class which best reflects on this theme is, of course, the witch, though the upcoming animist looks like it will be a natural fit as well. A kineticist who takes the elemental familiar feat might also fit this theme too, as might a druid of the animal or leaf orders. On the extreme end of this, a Rivethuni summoner might interpret their eidolon as a spirit whom they work alongside. Spiritual bonds which don't manifest as familiars or companion creatures are common as well. These might be represented in martial classes by the spirit instinct barbarian, or by the monk. Monks in the Rivethun interpret their ki powers as manifestations of their spiritual energy. Similarly, a barbarian's rage might be interpreted as a channeling of spiritual power into physical might. I also want to mention that the thaumaturge might connect their implements to bonded spirits, which infuse them with power. Spellcasters with such a bond might include the psychic, who could attribute their developing powers to a deepening bond to the spirits within themselves. In the same way, an oracle might attribute their curse to the effects of a malicious spirit, which they must learn to live with and overcome, or maybe even exploit as they develop their powers. It's also worth noting that the upcoming Rivethun Emissary class archetype will be further exploring how the Rivethun are able to channel divine magic without a connection to a traditional deity. Members of the Rivethun typically dress in clothing which connects them to the spirits they revere. Those who've bonded to an animal or nature spirit often incorporate pieces of natural material into their gear, from shed feathers or antlers incorporated into their skirts or helms to small pieces of uncut rock worn as decoration. By contrast, members who have bonded to the spirits within objects or the spirits of the dead might carry antique objects or recovered historical artifacts on their persons. This might result in characters with a haphazard or eclectic appearance. Of course, dwarves are far and away the most common ancestry present in the Rivethun. The organization's origins among the dwarves of the Darklands have kept it relatively insulated from outsiders, even into the Age of Lost Omens. The Rivethun are most active among Avistani dwarves, as I have found no reference to the sect being present among the Teralu or Mbeke dwarves of the Mwangi Expanse, or the dwarves of Dongon Hold. Even in Avistan, the Rivethun are still a small sect, even compared to the faiths of minor members of the Dwarven pantheon, but they are still widely respected. Even non-members of the order might call a Rivethuni spiritualist to consult the spirits during the birth of a child or the death of a loved one. Despite this relative isolation, however, the Rivethun aren't an exclusively dwarven organization. Particularly in Highhelm, the organization has begun to draw members of other ancestries. This includes humans who have made their home in the Five Kings Mountains, and also geniekin with connections to earth, fire, and, more recently, metal. Dromar and halflings have recently been drawn to the order as well in greater numbers. While the philosophy of the Rivethun might appeal to these individuals on its own, they might also be drawn to the order's approach to gender and acceptance. In this area, the Rivethun are certainly more progressive and developed than many cultures around them, which might draw the attention of gender nonconforming individuals from all over Avistan. If you play a character affiliated with the Rivethun, it's important to remember that they rarely choose violence as a first resort. Members of the Rivethun are taught to relate to those around them and to understand their pain and struggles. Rivethuni philosophy is one of observation, sympathy, and discussion, rather than direct conflict. While their spiritual connections grant them power, they consider their greatest tools to be internal, their capability to learn, relate, and resolve. Violence is a tool they can, and will, employ, but only after they've given diplomacy and negotiation a chance. Of course, there are situations where such an approach is unwarranted: mindless undead, raging mindless creatures, constructs, etc. In these cases, members of the Rivethun are swift to act, so they might preserve the lives of their comrades and the members of their community. But they are also quick to mourn a fallen foe, especially one they were forced to strike down, who they might have befriended had circumstances been different. For GMs looking to integrate the Rivethun and their members into a campaign, here are some ideas. In the Age of Lost Omens, the Rivethun are most active in Highhelm, the capital of the Five Kings Mountains and the heart of dwarven culture in Avistan. In the face of the rising threat of the Whispering Tyrant, King Borogrim the Hale and the other leaders of Highhelm recently ordered the development of a new defensive fortification for the city, called Torag's Shield. In recent years, a truly massive deposit of adamantine ore was discovered beneath Highhelm. The dwarves of Highhelm used this deposit to develop a new type of alloy called keepstone, notably a metal, not a stone, which is nearly as strong as adamantine, but has the unique ability to disrupt magic. Sensing an opportunity, and motivated by the return of Tar-Baphon, the engineers of Highhelm devised a plan. They created the schematics for a massive wall which could be raised in times of distress, made entirely of keepstone. This fortification would allow the dwarves and their allies to hide behind a magic-resistant fortification, and would obscure any attempts to scry on the citizens of Highhelm. Naturally, construction of this defense has been a top priority for the government of Highhelm, but this prioritization has a cost. Numerous spirits are being disturbed or displaced to ensure that mining and construction can continue, and the anti-magical properties of the keepstone are having unintended spiritual consequences as well. For this reason, the Rivethun are urging caution and restraint in the wall's construction, as they are unable to keep up with the rate of spiritual disturbances. Some members of the Rivethun have even taken drastic measures, such as sabotage, to slow construction. In King's Heart, the middle level of Highhelm, a Rivethun member of some authority, Ezra Burnstone, has even led demonstrations and marches opposing the construction methods. Another loose thread in Highhelm involves the rivalry between the Rivethun and the druidic order known as the Circle of Four. The Circle of Four is a druidic cult whose public-facing purpose is the enhancement and maintenance of the elemental rift tools which supply the city. For example, rifts to the plane of fire to heat forges without fuel, and connections to the plane of water for hydration and sanitation. In recent years, they've even been pushing for rifts to the plane of earth to expand mining operations. Of course, this is only a facade. In truth, the cult is actually a sect of malicious worshippers of the wicked elemental lords, the evil demigods of the elemental planes. The goal of their efforts in Highhelm is to turn the city into a site where the elemental lords might expand their influence to the material plane directly. The Rivethun oppose the Circle of Four, seeing their public-facing efforts as dangerous and ill-advised. A few members might even suspect the group's true motives, though that is unclear. It is also unclear how the Circle of Four is responding to the resurgence of the planes of wood and metal, or to the escape of the benevolent elemental lords from their imprisonment. On a smaller and less malicious scale, the group known as the Winding Path is a collection of dwarves who believe that devotion to tradition is a mistake, and is holding dwarven kind back from their destiny. These dwarves constantly push for progress and innovation, putting them firmly at odds with the tradition-minded Rivethun. Finding a healthy middle ground between these two groups could certainly present a nice backdrop for an adventure. Finally, it might be fun to take the Rivethun out of Avestan and put them in a different region, or culture. Dongon Hold would work well for a fish-out-of-water story like this, but I already discussed them in my video on Magrim. Instead, I would suggest a story surrounding a contingent of Rivethun visiting the Teralu dwarves of the Mwangi Expanse. The Teralu, much like the Rivethun, take a unique approach to dwarven religion and spirituality. The Teralu dwarves revere dragons as manifestations of divinity, and interpret Torag and the other gods of the dwarven pantheon as dragons rather than dwarves, and revere living dragons on Golarion as something akin to deities. This interpretation of faith would make for a fascinating contrast, or indeed complement, to the faith of the Rivethun, and would make for a great backdrop of cultural exchange for an adventure. Before I end this video, I want to propose one final campaign idea to close out Dwarf Month. The dwarves are my favorite core ancestry on Golarion, and I love the attention they've gotten from Paizo in recent years. A bit of background here. From the time I was 13 until about 20, my favorite book was The Hobbit. While it wasn't my introduction to fantasy, that honor goes to Redwall and the Chronicles of Prydain, the story of Bilbo and the company of Thorin Oakenshield venturing to the Lonely Mountain to recover the lost treasures captured by the fearsome dragon Smaug enraptured me as a child, and stuck with me into adulthood. My first ever tabletop RPG character was a halfling rogue who, paid homage to Bilbo Baggins. I played him for an afternoon on a Boy Scout camping trip when it was too cold to go outside. The idea of dwarves and their allies facing some terrible dragon to reclaim lost dwarven glory stuck with me until I took up Pathfinder. So imagine my happy surprise when I discovered that someone at Paizo left a plot hook with just those themes right there in the Five Kings Mountains. At the conclusion of the quest for Sky, the legendary King Targic sensed hesitation and worry among his fellows. Determined to rally the confidence of his people, Targic commissioned the creation of an artifact of power, forged from the finest metals available both in the Darklands and on the surface. This artifact was forged using the knowledge of the finest dwarven smiths, and embodied the hopes of the dwarven people and the teachings of Torag. This resulted in the creation of the Axe of the Dwarvish Lords, a weapon of tremendous power. Upon the weapon's completion, Targic raised the weapon high and addressed his people, convincing them of the bright future which awaited them on the surface. For generations, the Axe of the Dwarvish Lords was passed from king to king, until the Five Kings Wars. These were a series of 19 civil wars over a period of 700 years, starting in 1571 AR. And during these conflicts, the Axe of the Dwarvish Lords was lost. And, to paraphrase Lady Galadriel, for 2,500 years, the axe passed out of all knowledge. The artifact finally resurfaced in the 4370s, in the possession of Ordric Talric, a dwarf noble who assassinated his cousin to ascend to the throne of Tar Kardum in 4369 AR. How he located the axe is unclear, But Ordric recognized the threat the axe posed, and took great pains to hide it in Droskar's Crag, a volcano associated with his faith. Unfortunately, this put the axe firmly in the territory of the magma dragon Moshkabat. The dragon slaughtered the party of dwarves sent to hide the axe, and claimed it as his own. So, this is my campaign proposal, a quest to recover the axe of the dwarvish lords and restore it to dwarven society. In the Age of Lost Omens, no one alive still remembers the location of the axe. Ordric and his followers died at the conclusion of the Forge War, and Moshkabat is unlikely to spread any rumors of the axe's location. A hint to the axe's location might come from an escaped prisoner from Moshkabat's domain, or from a spirit who wandered from Droskar's Crag, or maybe even from one of the Magma Dragon's servants who wandered out of his territory and was captured. Once the PCs learn of the axe's location, they have a substantial challenge on their hands. Droskar's Crag is an incredibly hostile environment. Approaching on the surface puts the PCs in close proximity to Darkmoon Vale, a region inhabited by hags, werewolves, fae, and a number of other powerful threats. Subterranean approach is difficult as well, since many of the ancient cave networks collapsed during the last eruption of Droskar's Crag in 3980 AR, about 800 years ago at time of recording. New passages would need to be dug or explored to make an underground approach, or the PCs would need to travel through the Darklands. Once they make it to the crag itself, the real challenge begins. Droskar's Crag is the former site of one of Dwarvenkind's greatest cities, Yernashal, or maybe Jernashal, I'm not really sure on the pronunciation. Yernashal was the capital of Tar Kardum, and was actually the largest and most prosperous city in the Five Kings Mountains for the better part of a century. This all came to a halt when Droskar's Crag erupted and wiped out the inhabitants of the city almost entirely. The remains of the city can still be found in the crag, and are infested with monsters and terrifying undead. After all that, the PCs would need to deal with Moshkabat and his followers directly. Moshkabat is served by a group of Moonsahirs, formerly called Azers, dubbed Clan Zillaran, who take great pride in forging powerful items for their dragon master. He is also served by a clan of kobolds, known as the Flame Torrent tribe. These kobolds have mechanized much of the remaining cave networks to allow them to move treasure around, and have built a series of complex traps to protect their master's hoard. And at the end of everything, there's Moshkabat himself, a 17th level foe who might be translated into a fortune dragon in the post-remaster age. In my mind, this extended adventure, or campaign, is a perfect follow-up to last year's Sky King's Tomb, as it builds on the theme of dwarven history. The campaign even has its own post-campaign story hook. Moshkabat's chief lieutenant back in 1E was a drow called Sivia Zirendax. With the OGL debacle forcing Paizo to remove the drow from the canon, a GM might simply replace her with a cavern elf, or some other Darklands denizen, like a Hringar. Or, and this is what I would do, a GM might deliberately leave Sivia as she was. See, the way I'm handling the drow at my table is that they still exist, but are hidden far deeper in the Darklands than was previously thought. They operate with such secrecy that they have yet to be encountered by any surface dweller who might manage to keep records of them. PCs discovering Sivia as Moshkabat's right hand could kick off an extended search into the Darklands to discover the nature of what she is and where she came from. Alright, that about wraps up this campaign idea. Sorry for the incredibly extended tangent, but I've had this idea in my head for a while, and I wanted to get it out into the world. And for the record, the theme song for this campaign idea is definitely the Feuerschwanz cover of I See Fire, in case you like this idea and want a little musical inspiration. So that's it. That's the Rivethun, the faction of dwarven spiritualists who maintain a connection to the ancient dwarven traditions, even in the face of relentless societal progress. While they are a small faction in the grand scheme of things, they hold substantial cultural power. I've liked them since I first read about them back in 1E, and I'm glad I got to discuss them to close out Dwarf Month. Up next, it's time to get spooky. October is all about ghosts and ghouls, so what better way to celebrate than with another entry in my So You Want to Play series, this time focusing on one of the most popular entry points for PF2E players everywhere. Next up is my video player's guide to the Abomination Vault's Adventure Path, an AP with more than a little haunting going on within its pages. See you next time.